In 1975, a 24-year-old engineer at Kodak built the world's first digital camera. It was the size of a toaster, weighed 8 pounds, and captured images at 0.01 megapixels. It took 23 seconds to record a single photograph onto a cassette tape. His bosses asked him to keep it quiet. 37 years later, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The company that invented digital photography was destroyed by digital photography. Not because they missed the revolution, because they saw it coming, built the technology that would power it, and then buried it to protect a business that was already dying. This is the story of how a 131-year-old company held the future in its hands and chose to strangle it instead. To understand the fall, you need to understand the empire. In 1888, George Eastman launched Kodak with a slogan that changed consumer behavior forever. You press the button, we do the rest. Before Kodak, photography required chemistry knowledge, bulky equipment, and hours of work. Eastman made it simple. Buy a camera, take pictures, mail it back, and receive your prints. By the mid-20th century, Kodak didn't just dominate photography. It defined it. The company controlled 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. The phrase Kodak moment entered the English language, becoming shorthand for any memory worth preserving. At its peak in 1996, Kodak employed 145,300 people worldwide. The company was valued at $31 billion. It ranked among the 5 most valuable brands on Earth, alongside Coca-Cola and Marlboro. But here's what made Kodak truly powerful. The razor and blades model perfected decades before anyone called it that. Cameras were sold cheap. Film was sold forever. Every birthday party, every wedding, every vacation, every baby's first steps. Each memory required more film, more developing, more prints. A single customer might buy a camera once and purchase film for 40 years. Kodak's profit margins on film exceeded 70%. The business wasn't just profitable. It was an annuity. Recurring revenue from billions of moments, year after year, generation after generation. And then one of their own engineers showed them how it would all end. Stephen Sasson was a young electrical engineer who joined Kodak in 1973. 2 years later, his supervisor gave him an assignment: explore whether charge-coupled devices, a new type of electronic sensor, could be useful for imaging. Sasson built a prototype. It was crude, assembled from leftover parts and existing Kodak components. The camera captured a 100-line black-and-white image and stored it on a digital cassette tape. To view the photo, you had to connect the device to a television set. On December 12, 1975, Sasson took the first digital photograph in history. It showed a lab technician named Joy. The image took 23 seconds to record and another 23 seconds to display. When Sasson presented his invention to Kodak's executives, he included a projection. Based on the trajectory of semiconductor technology, he estimated that digital cameras would reach consumer quality resolution in 15 to 20 years. Sasson later recalled their reaction in interviews. They were convinced that no one would ever want to look at their pictures on a television set. Print had been with us for over 100 years, and no one was complaining about prints. Then came the question that would define Kodak's fate. An executive asked, why would anyone ever want to look at their pictures on a TV? That was 1975. The first iPhone launched in 2007. Today, over 1.4 trillion digital photos are taken every year. Almost none of them are ever printed. Sasson had given Kodak a 32-year head start. They spent most of it standing still. Kodak didn't ignore digital technology. They studied it obsessively. Internal documents from the early 1980s reveal that Kodak's own analysts understood exactly what was coming. A 1981 research report ran to 80 pages. It predicted that digital photography would replace film-based photography within a generation. The report outlined the likely timeline, the technical milestones, and the market disruption that would follow. The analysts were right about almost everything. They correctly forecast when resolution would match film quality. They accurately predicted the emergence of electronic image storage. They even anticipated the death of photo developing. One line from that report deserves to be carved in stone. Digital photography has the potential to fundamentally alter the structure of the imaging market. Kodak's leadership read these words, and then they made a calculated decision. They would not lead the digital transition. They would delay it. The logic was seductive. Film generated over 60% of Kodak's revenue and an even larger share of profits. Cannibalizing that business to chase digital would destroy shareholder value for years, possibly decades. Why accelerate your own obsolescence? So Kodak continued investing in digital research. They accumulated over 1,000 digital imaging patents by the 1990s while deliberately slowing the commercialization of that research. When Kodak engineers developed breakthroughs, the technologies were often shelved or licensed to competitors rather than brought to market under Kodak's brand. The company wanted to own the patents without disrupting the cash flow. The strategy had a name internally. Executives called it protecting the golden goose. The golden goose was already dying. They just couldn't admit it. In 1989, Kodak hired a new CEO to navigate the coming storm. His name was Kay Whitmore. He was a film guy. Whitmore had spent his entire career at Kodak, rising through the ranks of the film division. He understood emulsions, chemical processing, and paper coatings. He didn't understand semiconductors. More importantly, he didn't want to. At his first shareholder meeting, Whitmore was asked about the digital threat. His response became infamous. "We're moving into the info imaging area as rapidly as makes business sense." Under Whitmore's leadership, Kodak doubled down on film. They launched new film stocks, built new processing labs, and poured money into extending the life of a technology their own researchers had declared terminal. The board eventually forced Whitmore out in 1993, but the pattern was set. His replacement, George Fisher, came from Motorola with digital credentials and immediately ran into the same wall. Fisher pushed for digital investment. The film division pushed back. Internal documents revealed the tension. Digital products generated $1.8 billion in revenue by 1999, but film executives argued that every dollar spent on digital was a dollar stolen from the cash cow. Fisher lasted 6 years. His successor, Dan Karp, tried again. Then Antonio Perez. Same story, same resistance, same results. Between 1989 and 2005, Kodak cycled through 4 CEOs and 5 different digital strategies. They spent over $5.1 billion on digital acquisitions and R&D. None of it mattered, because every CEO faced the same impossible math. Film still made money, digital still lost money, and Wall Street punished any quarter where margins declined. So they kept protecting the golden goose, even as its feathers fell out one by one. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Kodak had multiple opportunities to pivot. Each time, they chose preservation over transformation. In 1981, Sony launched the Mavica, an electronic camera that stored images on floppy disks. It wasn't technically a digital camera, it captured analog video stills, but it proved consumer appetite for filmless photography existed. Kodak responded by commissioning more internal research rather than launching a competing product. A study from that period concluded Sony's technology posed no immediate threat to film. They were right about immediate. They were catastrophically wrong about everything else. In 1991, Kodak released the DCS-100, a digital camera built on a Nikon body. It cost $13,000 and was marketed exclusively to photojournalists. The product proved Kodak could build digital cameras. It also proved they didn't want regular consumers to buy them. In 1994, Apple approached Kodak about co-developing a consumer digital camera. The QuickTake 100, launched that year, became one of the first digital cameras sold to mainstream consumers. The irony is staggering. Kodak manufactured the sensor. Kodak owned the patents, and Apple put their name on the product because Kodak refused to. Apple sold the QuickTake for $749. It captured 640 by 480 images. It was primitive, expensive, and limited. It was also a glimpse of the future. Kodak saw that future inside their own factory and looked away. One former executive told Harvard Business Review, "We developed the world's first megapixel sensor, the first OLED display, and the first digital camera with onboard image storage. We had everything, and we did nothing." By the time Kodak finally launched consumer digital cameras in earnest, the market had already moved on without them. In 2001, Kodak acquired a photo-sharing site called oPhoto for $24 million. It was exactly the right move, anticipating that digital photos would need a digital home. This was 3 years before Facebook launched, 4 years before Flickr was acquired by Yahoo for $35 million, 9 years before Instagram. Kodak had the platform, they had the brand recognition, they had millions of customers who already associated their name with photographs, and they used oPhoto to sell more prints. That was the strategy. Let people upload digital photos, then convince them to order physical copies. The entire platform was designed to drive users back to paper. Kodak's executives couldn't imagine a world where people didn't want prints. Even after they bought a digital photo service, they used it to prop up the analog business. Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg was building Facebook in his dorm room. Photos became the platform's most shared content. By 2010, users were uploading 2.5 billion photos per month and printing almost none of them. Kodak sold oPhoto in 2012. The buyer paid $23.8 million. They lost $200,000 on a platform that could have been Instagram. The numbers told the story before anyone was ready to hear it. In 2000, Kodak reported $14.3 billion in revenue. By 2005, revenue dropped to $13.3 billion. By 2010, it was $7.2 billion. By 2011, $6.0 billion. In 2004, Kodak was removed from the Dow Jones Industrial Average after 74 years. The index that had tracked Kodak since 1930 decided the company was no longer relevant to the American economy. Staff reductions followed the revenue collapse. From 145,300 employees at the 1996 peak, Kodak dropped to 47,000 by 2005, then 24,400 by 2008, then under 20,000 by 2011. Rochester, New York, the company town Kodak had built, watched its largest employer disintegrate. At one point, Kodak had employed 60,000 people in Rochester alone. When the bankruptcy came, fewer than 7,000 remained. On January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that invented digital photography had been destroyed by digital photography, not by a competitor who moved faster, by their own decision to move slower. Here's the detail that makes the story unbearable. Those 1,000-plus digital imaging patents Kodak accumulated, they became the company's most valuable asset in bankruptcy. In 2012 and 2013, Kodak sold its patent portfolio for approximately $525 million. Apple, Google, Facebook, Samsung, and Microsoft all paid for licenses to technology Kodak had invented but never commercialized. The companies that now dominate digital photography paid Kodak for the privilege, not as competitors, as buyers at a liquidation sale. Stephen Sasson, the engineer who built the first digital camera in 1975, remained at Kodak for over 30 years. He watched from inside as the company systematically refused to deploy the technology he'd invented. In 2009, President Obama awarded Sasson the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for his work. The medal recognized an achievement his own employer had spent decades trying to bury. In his acceptance speech, Sasson didn't mention Kodak's failures. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room already knew. Kodak emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a much smaller company focused on commercial printing. The consumer photography business was gone forever. The conventional narrative says Kodak failed because they didn't adapt to change. That's wrong. Kodak failed because they saw change coming and chose not to adapt. The real lesson is more uncomfortable. Kodak's executives weren't stupid. They were rational. They did exactly what business school teaches: protect margins, extend product life cycles, manage disruption gradually rather than embrace it recklessly. Every decision made sense in isolation. Don't cannibalize a 70% margin business. Don't obsolete your own products. Don't panic. But rationality optimized for the present can destroy the future. Kodak wasn't killed by what they didn't know. They were killed by what they knew and refused to act on. The first digital camera sat in a Kodak lab in 1975. The company had 37 years to lead the revolution they started. Instead, they spent those years hoping the future would wait. It didn't. Today, over 4 billion people carry digital cameras in their pockets. They take photos, share them instantly, and never print a single one. The Kodak moment still exists. It just doesn't need Kodak anymore. The company that told the world, "You press the button, we do the rest," couldn't press the button on its own survival. And that's the cruelest irony of all. Kodak didn't miss the future. They built it, buried it, and watched someone else dig it up.